What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Essential Scares. I am your host, Corbin. With me today, we've got Alan.
Hey.
Grant.
What's up?
And Bobby.
What's going on, guys?
Oh, I love that.
That's a whole lot of energy.
It's almost too much, but not.
I'm just matching Corbin's energy a little bit.
You gotta. We have a great show for you, everybody. Today, we're going to be reaching back in time for our first legacy review with the 1992 urban folk horror classic, Candyman. But before we get into the meat of it, Bobby has a spoiler warning for us.
I do. This will serve as your first one and only spoiler warning for Candyman. Skip to the time code ahead for our spoiler-free essential discussion. Candyman. More like B-Man, am I right? Corbin?
I wasn't expecting you to go that route at all.
No.
I know. See...
It almost seems like it was stolen from someone.
All right.
True.
So that actually, I'm just gonna go ahead and lead into that.
Yeah.
One of the things that stuck out to me about this movie is how unabashedly 90s it is. Not only in its like sensibilities, but like in its political stylings as well. All of the messaging that it's putting forth, though accurate today, is very 90s. Mm-hmm. But the moment that made me think of that for sure was when she is investigating the candy and there's razor blades in the candy. And I was just like, oh my god, this movie is so 90s.
Oh my, yeah, it's hilarious.
It's the candy your parents warned you about.
Yeah.
Be careful, there's going to be crack cocaine and razor blades in there. I want to say one thing though about the politics though.
Yeah, jump into it.
Just a forewarning. Mm-hmm. We are four straight cis white men who, due to a lot of the politics in this, should probably just shut the fuck up. Just shut the fuck up. That being said, we're also podcast hosts, so we're not going to do that, and we're going to try our best to do this correctly. Just a forewarning to anybody who doesn't, who probably thinks, hey, shut the fuck up. We know, and we're sorry. And anyway,
you're telling me you don't want a podcast of like an hour and a half of just pure silence of us just staring into the camera ominously?
Yeah.
Just
that sounds entertaining as hell.
Shuffling our feet, being like, man, this movie's saying a lot about people like us. But that being said, this movie says a lot about class struggle as well as the racial divide, specifically in Chicago, where this podcast is
hosted from.
situated. Yeah, basically. So very specific to us.
Yep.
You want to get into that?
I do want to get into that. Yeah, I think that it would be great to get into that, and I actually think that there's a really easy angle to jump into right away from just because of our own backgrounds, and that is the not just like the class struggle, but like the race aspect, but the way that the movie tells its racial story, the way that it tells a black story from a white perspective. I think that is core to the movie, and I think that was interesting to me because as I was watching it, I was thinking like, oh, if they made this movie now, it would probably just be all black leads, and it would be great. And of course, the new one is a primarily black cast. But the more I watched it, I was like, oh, you know what? Actually, the movie is saying what it's saying because it's like trying to put it through like almost like the reverse lens, and I thought that was very interesting. That there are a couple of moments there where it plays that really, really strongly. I think most strongly, when the lead character, I'm forgetting her name, Helen, when she gets arrested, the power dynamic is flipped like immediately because all of the arresting officers are black, and that happens like multiple times. Every time there's someone who has power over her, with the exception of those two college professors in the beginning, they're black people, and I think that is done intentionally, because up until that point, she is looking down on people. Like she's looking down on those people the whole time, and I think that's why they do that.
No, I agree. I think this movie is very much about like whether it was intentional or not, and I'm not sure it always necessarily was, becomes an indictment on like being like on like white liberals hoping to be the savior of black people. Like from the moment Helen goes into Cabrini Green, right? Like, or even in, because like even before then she's like talking down to like the janitorial staff, and like they're just legitimately just normal people telling rumors, right? And then she goes in and like she's all freaked out at like the young kids essentially, like being
She's
like, yo,
worried
you
about,
can't
like,
yeah,
gang
you can't go in
banging and
there.
stuff.
You can't go in there. Like they're just like, don't come into our home. You're gonna cause trouble. And they're right. She does. Like, and like, and all of that. And then all of a sudden, right, there's that switch. And it's, I think it also kind of talks about this idea of like, especially in like 90s news, but like the idea of like the black boogeyman. It kind of plays into that, because it can be argued that Helen killed more people than Candyman does, right? Because like you don't ever really know one way or the other if Helen is the murderer or Candyman is the murderer. Like it's a figment of her imagination,
that's like a core
right?
part of the film, I think.
But they play it out like he's this boogeyman, but like is that not covering the crimes of Helen killing people? It's just really interesting that like, and it happens all the time, even today in the news, which is it's like there's just so much there. I really do think, and I'm not even necessarily sure. I mean, obviously some of this is very much text, right? It's very much trying to talk about like, you know, that like there is a socioeconomic divide and it's not cool, and people like they bring it up, like they even say it, like people have been dying in Cabrini Green for weeks, and as soon as one white woman gets attacked, they find the killer in a day. But like which is like, again, this white liberal thing, right? And I think that there is a, as you know, I'm a little bit farther to the left than liberals, but like just for clarity's sake, you know, this is not meant as an indictment on liberals, but there is a certain like savior complex, like we'll do it, we'll get you out of here, and like, which
and
is like,
and they showcase that, I think, as well, when she's out to dinner with her colleagues. And she's talking about, like, you know, she's doing this urban legends thesis, and the older male professor, you know, is basically trying to one up her by saying that he already did that. And I think that that's interesting, because you know, taking what you know about academia and what you know about the, you know, the people that go into it and all of that, and then you have this character who only has one scene, but you're getting not only that exact liberal viewpoint that you're talking about, but also this like very heavy-handed sexism all at the same time. And it seems like that. I think that the movie does so well in building the message without like beating you with it.
Yes, I agree.
For sure. I mean, that specific scene is just like, you know, the coworker just comes straight at her, demeans her, and that's like kind of what happened in the workplace a lot if you were a woman trying to, like, you know, get your way up. And even then, her lover, Trevor, just lets it happen. He just sits there and is like, hey, you know, whatever, which just kind of sucks. And like me watching that happen, I'm like, man, I hate this guy. But kind of,
I mean,
like,
you know, he's a scumbag from the moment you see him. Because I literally have written down, Stacy is fucking the prof. Because of course she was.
Well,
like,
and then
they make that so like demonstrably obvious that like Trevor's kind of just a shit.
And there's a story there that's not being told, that she was that person. She was Stacy.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's honestly funny because I have like written in my notes like of how like every man in this movie is kind of depicted as like arrogant and just really doesn't care what they have to say, and the only one who actually like craves her for more than like her body is Candyman, because he talks about like how smart she is and he wants her to be his victim. You kind of sit there and go like, oh wow, this is an interesting kind of take going on here.
But even
always you, Helen.
Even from Candyman, you have this very surface level Dracula style fixation on Helen. You know, I think that I think you can make the argument that maybe he's looking for more, but I don't know about that. I think he was clearly just trying to capture a lost romance.
Mm-hmm.
It was very heavy-handed Dracula style. Romance.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
his whole character is like very vampiric in a lot of ways.
That first scene where he's captivating her and her eyes are like glazed over, and he talks very smoothly. And Tony Todd's a handsome man, so like except for like the fangs are the scary thing, the hook and the very There's this macabre and undeath underneath it, but on top he's just this sultry, smooth, hot guy.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to a couple of things that you guys said, specifically like with the, this Candyman, the copycat Candyman gets away with killing, two African American people, but as soon as a white woman is injured, he gets put away immediately. And I feel like that also has a lot to do with how law enforcement treats like black on black crime, where they just kind of let it happen, and if they don't have enough leads, they're kind of like, oh well, he got away, instead of actually like going into it where like in the exact opposite lens, if it's black on white crime, it's instantly in the headlines and we're gonna find them, and it's just like, it's ridiculous how different the reaction is, and how even over the 17 some odd years, like it still feels the same way.
Sure.
Which is just rough.
Years,
yeah. But there was another thing, but I'll let you guys keep talking because I got to remember it.
A lot of things. It's all good. Alan, what do you think about this?
So a lot of the times while watching this movie, I wouldn't say uncomfortable would be the right way to phrase it,
for sure,
but it definitely had me gripped, on edge. And not just in the horror aspects of it, but in all of these other reasons we're talking about, like racial. It's not really undertones. It has aspects of undertones depending on the scene, but then there's also just overt overtones of like what it's trying to say to you. It'd be hard to watch this movie and not get that aspect of it. Like it's very forward in what it's kind of showing, and I think it's forward. And also kind of forward thinking in a way. This movie came out in 1992. To give just a quick background, I know at least two of us were born in 92. Bobby, are you? 93. So
I'm an early 93 though.
This movie came out when we were born.
Yeah.
And it was a very different world in 1992 than in 2021. But I think this movie almost has more impact with what it's trying to say right now than it might have back in 92, which that to me that's kind of a fascinating way to look at this. Now, you could maybe say that that's not a good thing per se, because you'd hope that we wouldn't have to have these kinds of messages in film and art in general, but clearly we need them. And it's this movie does that very well.
I mean, it's like like you said, 92 to 21, but it feels like everything that's happening here, like way back then, is still something we like are having trouble with now, which I think is surprising. Maybe not as much with the sexism thing, but it does still like exist. But like especially with like the race and classism stuff, it still is just so prominent. I mean, Cabrini Green. Basically, it's like low-income housing, and me and Bobby were talking about it before the show, but it's just like it gets this way because no one wants to clean it, and it's basically left to fend for itself. And
and another one of the overt messages they even say when she's in. I mean, they realize one of the only reasons they're able to kind of find Candyman's like shrine, I guess, is what that was, to give it a term, is. The building she lives in is the exact same building that's in what they call the projects. Yeah. And her friend character, I can't remember her name, says, "How much did you pay for this place?" Like, there are overt parallels here that you can see. The white class neighborhood, it's high class. There's all sorts of things. It costs so much money. Yeah. And then you have the same black neighborhood that is ruined, effectively. And
keep in mind,
terrible. Like, it's that it does this messaging really well without being overly preachy, which I think that to me is the key of like finding a rhythm in a movie. I think it does it really well.
Keep in mind a couple things. Like Cabrini Green is actually right by the Gold Coast, which for those of you who don't live in Chicago or the Chicagoland area, is a very wealthy district. And Grant brought up this. So like that being like they basically put it on the north side to like give people an opportunity, but essentially because Chicago is racist. They just are, right. The dailies were racist and it was not good. They also basically
ran by criminals for like 40, 50, 100 or so years.
Yeah. There was a lot that like basically they sent those tenements to like die essentially, right? Because the Cabrini Greens were actually a fairly progressive and like really nice buildings for a really long time, and then eventually they stopped sending building managers and stuff like that over there, and it kind of fell apart because that's what happens.
I think there's a reason why they chose Cabrini Green and not like a traditional like South Side project. Let's say like I think that they chose
back to that white savior stuff.
Absolutely, and I think that I don't want to jump too far ahead in the conversation, but the new one, the Candyman 2021. Still set in Cabrini Green, but which is very different than it was 30 years ago, and I think that that's probably going to play very strongly into.
I have a question.
The green apartments are gone.
Mm-hmm. What is that area like right now?
Sure,
like if I went there, what would it be like?
It's really nice for the most part. The Cabrini longhouses, which aren't featured in the movie, but they're like condos. Some of them are still up, but I don't think they're really being used. I think they're just meant as a thing. But the apartments that you saw, those are all gone. They basically there was a bill passed, a Chicago bill that basically every year they were going to build more affordable housing, and the first thing that they did is they just completely demolished the apartments and displaced hundreds of people outside of the city. It's really fucked up. Mm-hmm. So basically, right now it's a park.
Gentrification, basically.
Yeah, well,
which is another. You kind of see that when they talk about in the movie. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, there's like a Target there now, and like a Dick's Sporting Goods. And so it's going to be really interesting in the new movie when how they're going to work with that, because it's a lot about, from what I see from the trailers, about like him trying to like bring history through art and how that's going to affect him turning into the Candyman.
Right, I do like the fact that he's an artist in the new one, because it kind of like plays to like, especially if he is becoming like the Candyman, as like the trailer kind of shows. I mean, the Candyman was an artist, right, himself, and so I like that too, like the angle of like they have like the same aspirations and stuff. I thought that was a pretty cool angle to take on everything. Besides that, the little joke of like, you say Candyman 5 times in the mirror and he appears, and it's like, who would do that? And then it just flashes to a screen of like white people, and I'm just like, yep.
But so like there is like I think a lot of just even bringing it back to it, right? It starts out with like the traditional, like it's almost like a 1950s couple doing the Candyman, just like to really
it's the Bloody Mary
to really nail down the like the Candyman is a myth. And then like,
and I think that another thing about that scene that really stuck out to me is that they really play with your expectations of the genre of the movie, because that opening scene is very, very slasher, right? You've got like the house that they're in is very Halloween. The visuals there feel very Nightmare on Elm Street. Like they're kind of trying to reach into like your consciousness of slashers that you expect, and I think that impacts the way that you end up viewing the movie because of that opening.
I have written down 44 minutes in before the actual Candyman shows up, for example. And that's about when gore pretty much starts to happen. So it's funny you say that. So we get basically half the movie before any real gore or overt. I mean, there's horror imagery, but
there's only one on-screen kill in this entire movie.
Sure, but this is in the last episode I talked about how hard R is a good thing. Here's a prime example. The first time we see real gore, there's a dog's head. That's what I'm looking for. Like I want to see stuff that I should never see in regular existence. Conjuring never once did that. This movie does that, not immediately, but like it delivers on the kind of gore aspect in a horror movie that I'm expecting and wanting out of a horror movie.
Yeah. Oh well, yeah, and I just think that's I feel like a lot of the actual gore bits are very much loosely Clive Barker stuff. Because this movie doesn't even necessarily need it.
Kind of like
yeah.
It feels like that stuff
specifically
was included
feels very
because
Pinhead.
it was him. Exactly.
Yeah.
He was like the executive producer or whatever, and it was based on his
based off
story.
Of a book.
Exactly. So I do think that like if in some alternate universe this movie was made and it wasn't based on his story, I think that some of those aspects would have been very different. This could have been a PG-13 movie, honestly, with minimal adjustments.
I'm
glad it wasn't.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
but this movie oftentimes getting away from like all of the really like I think the stuff that really makes this movie its movie is it's the political subtext. Yeah. But it often gets confused as being a slasher flick.
Yes.
Do we think it is? Do we think it is?
So I actually I just saw this happen like 2 days ago after I watched the movie. I was on Reddit on Our Horror, and somebody was talking about like Nightmare on Elm Street or something, right? And they're like, "Oh, if I like this, what other slasher was what I like?" And people mentioned Candyman, and it's like, I always used to consider Candyman a slasher, and I think part of that is because when I was growing up, I had this like DVD that was all slasher villains, and it was just like clips of their kills before YouTube was the thing. Yeah. Alan knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep. I also have something I want to say about that, but
Candyman is in that. And I always used to think of Candyman as a slasher, and I've only seen it one other time before, and even after seeing it that other time, I thought of it that way. But then after watching it this time, I was like, it's really not a slasher, and he's really not a slasher villain. Like, this movie isn't a slasher, I think, in any traditional sense of the word.
Can I counter that really quickly? Because I don't think this movie is a slasher, but I do think Candyman is a slasher villain.
That's fair. I mean, I think go ahead.
Because slasher villains have that. It's a presence, where they like again. When you think of the big ones, you think of a Jason, you think of a Michael Myers, you think of a Freddy Krueger, right? Even if you think of like some new age ones, you think of a Ghostface. Some lesser known ones like Victor Crowley from Hatchet, right? Like all these characters have this like monumental, almost like universal monster presence. And Candyman fits in so well into that, right? He's the Dracula, and he feels right at home. And the sequels, which are less good by a large margin,
and much more slasher.
But they kind of cement it. But I feel like the bones are there. He talks, and when he talks, you listen. It's like that's where I kind of feel like. He does fit as a slasher, even though he doesn't necessarily like this isn't a slasher movie, so he doesn't even necessarily fit here. But they make it work, which is really cool.
I think that a lot of that has to do with just the strength of Tony Todd as an actor, right? Like when he's on screen, he makes the most of every second he gets on screen to give out that aura of, like you said, an overwhelming presence, right? And some of that is done with like the audio that they do with like, especially the parking structure, where he's all the way across, but it sounds like he's right in your ear talking to you. Like that sets the stage. You're like, oh man, this guy's like really scary. And then every other time he's on screen with the I would say somewhat limited time he has on the screen, I feel like he just makes the most of it, and that's how he can be a slasher villain in a movie that isn't considered a slasher.
I was about to say, I would be willing to bet that Candyman probably has the least amount of on-screen time, but does so well with the screen time that he's given. Every time he speaks, Grant, you hit the nail right on the head. When he speaks, and I love the first time I heard him speak and I heard that voice effect, I'm like, all right, well, I'm so into this. It was right where, and so I was listening to I usually when I'm watching the show for the cast, it'll be at random times. So 9 times out of 10 when I'm watching something, it's one ear on, other ear kind of open to hear what's going on. But anytime I watch movies for the cast, I always go both ears on so I can get the full effect. And man, when he comes booming in through the headphones, it's can't be missed. Another thing I wanted to say is it's funny you say he's definitely a slasher villain, because I have written down I would love to see Candyman in Mortal Kombat. Imagine the fatalities. Like rip him like asshole to fucking skull with his hook. It would be amazing.
Everybody
could do with him.
Everybody was theory crafting that he was going to be a killer in DBD, and people still say that he's...
What is DBD?
Dead by Daylight, sorry. For those who don't know what DBD is, it's basically like the Smash Brothers of like killers and other like big enemies. That's what it says on Reddit, man.
I like that description.
Yes.
I'm not against it, but I would never would have said that.
No, I like it.
I would have called it hide and seek. You're the people hiding, and a killer's attacking you.
True.
That's maybe not concise enough, but that is what it is.
So looping back, and I do have a little round table question then. What genre would you say this movie is in? If you were suggesting somebody to watch this movie, Candyman, and they're like, what kind of horror movie is it? I only like certain kinds or whatever. Like, what's the answer? What do you say? I have an answer. I opened the show with my answer.
Psychological? I feel like, for me, it would be psychological, and this actually helps me a lot because I get to go back to the thing that I just remembered. A lot of the movie, I was sitting there thinking, does Candyman actually exist, or is Helen just going crazy and killing these people and not remembering what's happening? So, like, even though we as an audience see that he's around, she gets hurt by him, and then someone comes in and saves the day by offering their own body. You sit there and like she is the person left, and you're just like, oh, is she like losing her mind? And like we don't get to see what crazy Helen is doing. We only get to see when she comes to. And that's why I would consider it psychological, is because like you sit there and like it makes even you as the audience who gets to see everything think, does Candyman exist?
Okay. Alan, what do you have to say?
So I think I'm probably the least, and it's ironic I even say this, given the fact that I've known Corbin my whole life, basically. I'm probably the least experienced in the horror kind of genre because I'm a little bitch baby. That's the easiest way to explain it.
They're with you, man.
But you see, I was on the cast, previously, but I did not watch nearly the same amount of movies and have the same kind of vernacular to speak on horror more effectively.
Sure.
So the best I could say is it feels kind of more like a thriller in a way for me, because this movie captivated me very much so. I was very, very interested in what was happening, what was going to happen next. And a lot of that has to do with the subtext, overt text, the racial things, because I think that's an interesting type of discussion to tackle, especially circa 1992. So there are things that kind of just will grip me naturally, and that's honestly one of them. But on top of that, you just have this ratcheting up. I mentioned it takes about 44 minutes before we really start to get into kind of hard horror. There's overt imagery that's tough to look at. I mean, there's literally a dog's head. It's gross. Like if you looked up "Does the dog die?" I know that's a website. You're gonna find a yes for this movie. So it takes its time in getting to the horror, but once it gets there, I sent a message in our No Funny Business chat, and I said this movie goes hard when it goes hard, or something to that effect. Because once it starts down that kind of gore horror path, it leans into it and really presents imagery that I really want out of horror movies. So it kind of spends about half the movie as a vague thriller, and then just goes into just horror from that point onwards. It's really about halfway point, right at about 44 minutes. So that's that's the answer I give you. Bobby,
is it my
let's
turn?
hear from let's hear from Bobby.
Oh, I'm gonna give the correct answer.
Oh wow,
this movie is a horror romance.
Okay.
Like
I see what you're saying.
It's like because there is this interplay with Trevor and Helen, and then Candyman comes in, and there's this enthrallment, and like there's this coming together, and destiny would have us together. It's always been you, Helen, and all that like interplay, and all the while, is Helen going crazy and murdering somebody? That's fucking scary. Or is Candyman real and like chop some poor disabled kid's dick off? Like, which is a thing that happened in this movie. Like what
totally skirted over that.
Yeah.
Not on screen, not on screen.
Yeah. But
well, it's funny.
Most of
Candyman is this thing.
Screen.
Exactly.
I said earlier the Mortal Kombat asshole to head. That was a very intentional phrase there.
He says groin to gullet.
Yeah, he is all about just ripping you the whole way, and that's so unsettling to know the people that die. That's how they die. Even if it doesn't overtly show it, that's how Trevor dies.
You see it with the psychologist.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Yep.
But no, it's a horror romance.
Okay.
It actually, when you asked that question, the first thing I thought of is, what would I consider Bram Stoker's Dracula to be? Because I think they're totally similar. Yeah,
it's called the Disney Channel original movie. My Mom's Dating a Vampire, whatever the fuck it was, like circa 2000. Yeah. That we have that movie already, Bobby.
I was talking about the 1992 film Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Right,
I was talking about the actual movie. I don't know.
I'm just fucking with you.
That is a movie dripping with sexuality.
Yeah. And this movie has, I feel, the same thing.
I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, I've mentioned it a couple times. Like Candyman felt very Dracula-esque to me. Just to add an element to that, right? I opened the show and I called it a folk horror movie, and I stand by that. And I don't.
You're wrong, but that's okay.
I don't dispute what Bobby is saying, and I think that his description is probably much more accurate if you're going to just tell somebody, and it's probably more representative of what the movie actually is. But I think that the story itself, like the bones of it, are very folk horror, and it's like this urban twist on the genre. And I think you even see some of the tropes of folk horror. Like I think most importantly, the pyre at the end. Like as soon as she's walking past that, the big mountain of garbage. And she asks that little kid, I forget his name, like, "Oh, were you having a party, whatever?" And he says, "What it's for." And
for the party later.
And I immediately, as soon as that happened, I was like, okay, that's the pyre, and this is a folk horror movie. And now how am I thinking about it? And it really adjusted, I think, the way that I thought about it. And I think that angle of it leans even further into, like, the race aspects, because there's this element the entire time. And most folk horror movies are told from the perspective of somebody who doesn't believe the local myth. And
that's a key part of the entire movie.
Exactly. And so like that, it pushes even harder into the undertones of this movie of like white people don't believe black people a lot of the times, even about like
believe the black experience. Yeah,
exactly. And like, so even with this, where it's just like a local legend, she's totally dismissive, and there's a racial element to that, and then also like the horror element to that.
You say that, and her friend, what was her friend's name? Bernadette.
There you go.
So Bernadette is also African American, and she is, from the whole time she's alive, she is much more believing of what is occurring, and is much more on edge than Helen, who's just like, whatever, man, it's fine, nothing's gonna go wrong. It's
white people.
Yeah, white. Bobby said white savior. Yeah,
that is our milieu. We go. Nothing will hurt me. I'm fine. And then Candyman comes.
What's that sound? We should go check it out. Yeah. We got to make sure we split up first.
Another just like racial message when they first bring her in and they're like, we can't really charge you with anything right now, so you're gonna go away. I was like, are you?
Yeah, they just let her go.
I literally paused the movie and I was like, if this is a black person, that person is in shackles and is gonna be in jail. Like, no bail, done, you're out. But the fact, like, that almost was like too forward in a way, because they were like, we can't do any charges. It's like, okay, but you got caught with a machete in your hands and a woman with a cut in her arm and a missing baby and a dog's head. It's like, it's one of those, it's like a conceit for the movie. You kind of have to just subvert. You kind of put that out of your head.
I almost
it's a
put
movie,
that on the
it's
list
okay.
of things that are like, what is that? There's a few of them. Like, is this really part of the message, or is this just it's a movie? Like, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that particular instance is like, why does it happen? Like, it has to, so the movie could happen. Like, I think that's
I agree.
Some of this movie, I don't know how much of it is because it could be a lot of it. Feels almost like they stumbled ass backwards into this.
I agree, and actually, there's
into the wokeness.
Yeah,
there's a specific instance of that. I'll loop back around to you. I'm sorry.
Okay, take it away. Yep,
go for it, Corbin. Sorry,
Bobby. You mentioned it earlier when she first goes to Cabrini Green and she runs into those kids outside, right? You look at that now, and I think you can associate a message to it, but I don't think that necessarily the message that you would associate with that now is the message that people were receiving or giving in 1992. Like, I think that was, those kids were basically
meant to look scary.
Exactly. They were the the shop owner in Friday the 13th. They were the guy that tells you not to go in, and they were the scary person that tells you not to go to the scarier place. Like, I don't think that there was a racial message intended. I think it's easy to get one, and I think that it deservedly reads as such, but I don't think that was an intentional message at the time.
I think you might be right, and the reason why I think you might be right is there is a story. I know a lot about this movie. With director Bernard Rose went to the NAACP and basically had a meeting with them to make sure it was cool for there to be a black slasher villain, and the NAACP basically responded with, "Why are we even having this meeting? This movie is obviously just good fun. And if Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers can go around killing people, so can Tony Todd. The fact that we're having this meeting seems pretty problematic to me, bro." Like, it was essentially like the thing about it. So it's like, and again, the NAACP is by no means the be all end all of what black people think about their own stuff. This movie has tons of controversy of people feeling like it's racist.
Right.
I can't tell you how you feel about it, right? That's your lived experience is your lived experience. But that's what makes me feel like some of this was meant to be, and some of this is just like, oh, they just lucked into something that like we can now interpret with better eyes because we've all grown as a society, and hopefully that's a good thing, right?
I want to touch on that really quick before Alan, because I find it impressive that like this movie can stumble into those issues without, at least to me, feeling like the movie is being overtly like racist or classist or sexist. And like, if you stumble into these themes and somehow just avoid all the landmines that exist, that in itself is kind of impressive to me. That like it doesn't really feel that way to me. It feels like a horror movie that hits on very, very sensitive themes without being considered any of those like derogatory terms.
I think sometimes it doesn't though, but go for it, Alan. I'm sorry.
So I think what you're saying there kind of lends credence to what Corbin was saying, where at times it seems like they are trying to say something, but at the same time, by making this movie it's really fascinating that we're going to have the 2021, right? That the sequel comes out.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Soon.
The discussion that we will have, because we're probably going to cover this movie on this cast, when that new one comes out, is going to be very interesting to look at a 2021 version of this movie that will definitely tackle these themes, because of course it will, versus a movie made in 1992 that probably didn't mean to say as much as it said. There's overt things. I mean, one of the notes I had written down was she shot? Is what Helen says to a black woman. Like, that is such an overt, maybe not necessarily overt, actually. That's a bad way to phrase that. It's what's the phrase, Bobby? The your subconscious racist something.
Microaggressions.
No, not that.
That is what it is.
That's not what it's. No, it's like unintentionally being racist in a way.
Unintentional racism?
Or bias. It has bias in it.
Implicit bias.
Yes, that. Sorry, the idea
What
like
a
oh, this is a black.
diatribe.
Yep.
Sorry, it took me a little while to get there. I poured a little more whiskey than I meant to.
That exact moment,
implicit
I think,
bias there of was she shot is I don't think in 1992 that's going to read the same way as in 2021 we look at that and go,
Right.
oof, that's
might
maybe not necessarily something you should be saying to somebody.
That might
like,
be
that's,
Bernard Rose's implicit bias.
Right.
Sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I
agree.
don't think that
agree.
reads the same in 92 as 2021. Or
No.
even, you could say probably from like 2015.
I do think it's hard to say, though. I don't know exactly when this movie came out, like what time of year, I forget. But you have to remember that in 92 we did have like the LA riots and all sorts of stuff like that. Like there was...
Yeah.
But this movie would have been produced at least or filmed before any of that would have occurred.
I'm not disputing what maybe was meant or what was intended, but I do think that there was a possibility that people who saw it right when it came out were reading into it further than intended, and then there was a period of time where it lost that, and like where like you're now like we're kind of regaining that subtext,
right?
Unintentional subtext, I should say.
I do. Sorry, if you're going to stay on topic, go, because I'm going to jump back to something.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, I do think that, like, that's the beauty of this art, though, is, like, you can fall backwards into subtext that's really important. There's, like, I mean, like, this movie is, I think, important, even if it wasn't meant to be, because it's part of a history that we are still reckoning with today. It's another note in that of like showing the ways in which we viewed like racial struggle within the racial struggle towards equality, white people have viewed black people, and how white people have messed up in that topic, right? Like you know, and like you brought up that implicit bias too, like that reminds me of like every time you've ever been in a meeting where like it's you and one black person and an older white guy is like shaking all your hands and then gives the black guy like the fist bump and the knuckles. It's just like, just fucking shake his hand, dude. Like like you know that, or like you know stuff like that. Like that same implicit bias is still very much alive today, and it's something that's like, again, it shows like the power that this movie harnessed, whether by just capturing the social zeitgeist, capturing the intentions of possibly the black people on like in the cast and crew.
Yeah, like how much did they bring to it that wasn't on the page? Like
we don't. And part of it is I'll have to do some research to find out, because I'm sure some of them have talked about it. But like I think that that bringing up that implicit bias is important. And cool and based and epic, dude.
Hey, I you know, we talked about it before the cast. Apparently, drinking Allen is just going to become based as hell, but here we are.
Love it. Big about it.
I wanted to go back to like the whole like sexism theme that exists in this, because I actually did a little bit of research about it, and like I didn't know what the Bechdel test was until I looked it up during this movie, and basically
you looked it up for this movie.
Yeah.
So
it is.
So what made you want to look it up if you'd never looked it up before?
I was because I felt like these.
Before you start
sexist.
What is the Bechdel test?
So the Bechdel test is basically a test that movies like undergo to basically test whether they are sexist or not, right? Sure. And it's three tenets to the rule. First one, it has to have at least 2 named women in it. 2 is they have to talk to each other. And 3 is their conversation has to be about something other than a man. And if those 3 rules hit, it's like considered by this test as not a sexist movie.
You'd be shocked how few films pass.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah.
And I mean, I looked it up because like I felt
paying
like
attention to it. It gets like
the
insane.
like the sexist themes that exist in like this movie. I wanted to like kind of just see all the background information that I could. And one of the Google links was like the Bechdel test. I'm like, oh, cool. I want to like look into this, and that's how I found that. Right.
Does this movie pass though? Because they're always talking about Candyman.
They are, but they're also talking about like their thesis and other things, and like things that aren't just about.
They talk about their apartment.
That's true.
Yeah, the apartment as well.
About that.
Right.
You would almost think that like needless nudity, which is in this movie, granted that's almost more just a trope of horror in general, would go into that.
That's tough
but like
because you have a lot of different perspectives on that and what it means from the people that do it. So,
Yeah,
the nudity was deeply desexualized.
Yeah,
I agree.
Is there even
Yeah,
any nudity in this movie?
there is.
She does that one. Yeah.
But like all of it, like it wasn't. I don't think that it was needless. I think it was.
It's more comfortable than sexualized.
Right. Exactly. But I said like there's these sexist themes, but like you have the strong female lead that is Helen, right? And it even. I looked this up as well. It even goes to the actor, right? Virginia Madsen, I believe her name is. If like near the end of the movie, she gets covered in bees, and they're all over her, and actually, apparently, the actor Virginia has a like bee allergy, and still was like, "Yeah, let's do the scene, let's do it." And I sat there, I'm just like, the real life fear and adrenaline that would be coursing through her veins during that time for her to stay like as in character as she was like so impressive, right? I mean,
that scene alone was so disturbing.
Yeah.
In terms of like, is this a horror movie? There's a lot of moments where you go, yeah, absolutely. That whole sequence near the end of her with him is so. So I've not actually watched like original OG Bram Stoker's Dracula. I really need to. I know I'm a bad person on a horror podcast.
Wait.
Okay,
Corbin,
he's talking about
I'm a bitch
Dracula.
boy, all right?
He's talking about Dracula, not Bram Stoker's
Dracula.
Yes.
You're talking about the Universal Monster movie Dracula. We're talking about Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is a movie starring Gary Oldman and Keanu Reeves. And
also not seen that movie.
What's her name? What is her name?
Winona Ryder? Is that
Winona Ryder? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. It is a very different movie.
It's incredible and quintessentially 90s.
Yes.
But I mean, Helen, just as a character, is very headstrong, right? She, some of it can be seen as like the like white stupidity in horror movies, where she's just like, oh no, nothing bad's gonna happen to me. But like when they're going to Cabrini Green, she's like, well, then I guess we don't write anything for the thesis, right? And like she pushes her friend to go, right? She goes to a lot of places and like investigates a lot further than anyone would, right? And even at the end, when there is that huge pyre, right, and she's in the fire, she fights tooth and nail to make sure that like the baby lives and gets to be reunited with the mother, even if she is, going kind of crazy at that point. And then even at the end, another thing that is like the strength of her is, I feel, in my opinion, she becomes the new Candyman, because in like one of the final scenes of the film, Trevor like is mourning the loss of his Helen, and is looking in the mirror and is like, Helen. She appears and kills him, and I'm just like,
no.
I just think it's a really cool kind of like twist, right? Because like at the end you do see the Candyman remains, even if no one saw him. Like you had the kid looks and sees like there is still a skeleton in the pyre, right?
Well, I mean, Candyman overtly says like, you will live on by being my victim. That's a big thing. He I have written down here, the pain will be exquisite. You want to talk about an evocative line.
What a Clive Barker line, by
it's
the way.
So good.
If you like that line, you're going to love next week's movie.
I'm super excited for next week's movie, because we talked about how apparently would next week's movie classify as body horror?
Yes. And
I'm real looking forward to it. All right.
It's both. It's both a gore and a horror and a body horror flick.
Into it. Let's go.
But I've avoided it for so long.
But Grant. Oh.
Sorry.
But Grant,
go ahead, Bobby.
I want to touch on the ending thing that you mentioned, because I think that like I'm glad you brought it up, because like the ending is kind of like this weird dichotomy, and I like your version of the ending where it's very much like his Helen, right? That like Trevor has always seen having his young up and coming women almost as like a thing to boost himself up. And so he's mourning the loss of one of his property, and she comes back and very much in death continues to liberate herself from him by killing him, which is like this really kind of it is a like not necessarily the most positive feminine icon, but it is absolutely a feminist thing of like, I don't need you, I never needed you, and I'm going to live on far past you, even if I died before you did, right? And I think that's a really good point, despite it being kind of a dark one.
Yeah.
Okay, go for it, Corbin. You have a different. I also have a different reading of it myself, but I think it's a good one.
So I actually kind of feel like, you mentioned that you feel like Helen becomes the new Candyman. I feel like that takes away from the core of what the Candyman story is. I don't think that Helen had the same level of trauma required to bring the same level of like oomph to her being the future villain. And I think there's a reason why Candyman comes back and she doesn't.
Okay, sure, but like, as a character, it's better. Like, Tony Todd's just a better actor, and he's a more commanding presence on screen because that's just what he is. Yeah. But I think within the story of this one film, it does a really good job. It also kind of, again, I feel like that is the design purpose there, or the design subtext with Helen becoming the new Candyman. But the fact that like it's a white guy at the end saying Candyman, bringing it back to like the racial thing, and then like saying like, oh, Helen, and then having to face the fact that like, we were the bad guys all along, and then Helen gets them, is like I think is a key moment as well. I think these two things kind of can go hand in hand and be like this whole an Ouroboros perfect circle. But I don't know. I really like the way that this movie went, and I think that this movie absolutely, like a lot of horror flicks that are done correctly, because there's also a lot of horror flicks that are absolutely not feminist movies, but like a lot of like major, really good horror movies with like good scream queens are like really like.
I think it's a surprising number. If you're outside of horror, it's a surprising number.
Yeah, are really feminist movies. Now, keep in mind, there are a lot of people who do horror that don't understand that this medium is progressive and feminist, and it's a different sort of art. It's a very transgressive art.
Right. Inherently so. Going all the way back. Yeah.
And but the fact that like this is do it wrong, and then all of a sudden you get like Maniac and like stuff that's like very much just like.
Are you trying to say you don't like Maniac?
I didn't say I didn't like Maniac.
Yeah,
I'm saying
exactly.
it's kind of not a.
We see what you're saying.
I'm saying it's I'm saying the first version of Maniac. I like the Elijah Wood version of Maniac better. I'll just put it that way.
All right.
Because the first one is deeply problematic.
You're not wrong. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
But so much fun to watch.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But so I think, what are we giving this movie out of 5 spoops? I think is a good question to ask going right now.
I agree. It is a good time. It is a good question to ask. Grant, I think, really wants to start.
Yeah,
I see him. He's inching out of his seat. He wants to say it so bad.
I am.
Grant, out of 5.
So, as Alan had said earlier, right, it was like a full 42 minutes before we even get to see Candyman. We don't even get to see the main villain. However, it never felt like that because they were touching on like so many sensitive themes that like I was interested even before horror came into play, right? It was only the mythological folklore angle, which I also really like about the movie. I think that the castings were really solid. Like, I mean, it's hard to say that, it wasn't when you have Tony Todd doing what he did. And I think Virginia Madsen did an amazing job as well, being like the female lead of the movie. I never really had any issue where I sat there and kind of pointed at it and go, don't like that, or like, hey, I'm not a big fan of that, and like I'm going over in my head as I'm talking, like, okay, I'm ranging between half and 5 spoops, and I think I have to give it a 5, even. Not even an even. There's no even. I think I give it a 5 because it touches the even is even if it's accidental, it touches all of these negative very negative themes and brings them to light in but doesn't take away from the horror aspect of it. And I think that is so crucial because we want a horror, we get a horror, but we also kind of get that like reminder of like, hey, things are kind of shitty the way they are. And I mean, the movie theater is a platform, and they're using the platform wisely. And I mean, it's hard not to give it a 5 out of 5.
I love that.
I think this movie does a lot. Whether it intended to do that or not, I don't think that overly matters, frankly, because there are plenty of art. There is plenty of art that, after its contemporary time, ages better, worse. It can vary wildly there, and I think this movie, for a long time, from probably say 1995 to maybe 2010-ish, is a very middle of the road kind of experience. But once we get into our more modern time, I think it elevated itself by saying things without actually saying things, and then also overtly saying things. It's a movie that I think in our current modern day will appear better than it may have been for the past 15-ish or so years. All that being said, I'm also with Grant. This is a 5 out of 5 for me. I thoroughly enjoyed my time watching this movie. It's the same gripping kind of movie. I was engaged the whole time. I wanted to know where this was going. I was, when different messages were being presented to me, I was receiving them and wanted to know, what more are you trying to say to me? This is a movie that, if you go into it with an open mind, you will ask questions when you finish the movie, which is very good, if you ask me. I was teetering somewhere between a 4 and a 5, somewhere in that range. Immediately after finishing it, I was like, this is somewhere between a 4 and a 5, and I wasn't exactly sure where I wanted to land on it. Really, and most of the times when we come into these reviews, I come in with a range of scores because I need to talk through my thoughts, because that to me is one of the best parts about this podcast is I may have seen something, but Bobby goes, hey, Alan, you're an idiot. Here's something else cool you maybe didn't pick up on. And I go, oh shit, Bobby's real smart. He had a great idea. That makes me appreciate it more. That discussion aspect kind of helps shape where I want my score to be. So to me, this does a lot in its hour and 30 minute runtime or so. It's pretty happy with this one.
Nice. Well, I don't want to sound too reductive at this point, but I don't know that I have anything to say that hasn't been said.
Sure.
I guess the only I'll leave it with, I loved the score. We haven't talked about it at all. The score for this movie is really, really good.
Yeah.
Let me just be clear. If you don't bring it up, we're not going to mention it. But yes, the score is very good.
I know. The score is really good. I think it really pulls you in a lot of aspects. I think that the cinematography is great. There are a lot of shots in this movie that are scary only because of the way that they're framed, or that are positioned in a way to kind of get you there. I think that the opening scene is the best example of this because it's just highway, but it's unsettling for no reason. It just is. And I think that is just exactly what the movie is. I think that even if you don't think about it too hard, there are aspects that are just unsettling, right? And especially if you're watching the movie in the modern day, I think a lot of people watch movies without thinking too hard. They don't want to think too hard, and I think there's a lot that this movie has to offer, even if you don't want to think about it, but that it will still get to you. I don't know. I leave it with my favorite Candyman quote from the whole movie, right? He says, you didn't believe the tales, so here I am. 5 out of 5.
Oh. I mean, I have nothing to add. I really don't. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. I've kind of talked a lot about it. It's just good. And I have some stuff that I want to mention in the next part of the podcast that I think will kind of help solidify it for it, but it's a 5. It's gotta be a 5 for reasons we'll talk about on whether or not this is essential.
Absolutely.
So let's get right into that, actually.
For sure. So is it?
Can I add one thing real quick?
Ooh, a spoiler-rific?
Not really. It wouldn't necessarily be spoilery. Your point, Corbin. I think that just in what you just finished with, I think that's where this movie is done so very well. Is its overt messages are overt enough without being too overt to say something. And that is not an easy line to actually find and go along without being just beating you over the head with the message it's trying to say. Which, make no mistake, the message this movie is trying to say is a good not good is a bad descriptor. Its message is important, what it's trying to say. And it does that without being preachy. And I think that is not an easy line to go along and keep your audience along for like a full, hour and a half runtime movie experience. Because at no point did I go, all right, well, this is, I get it. Thank you. I understand. I never had a moment like that. And that is not easy to do at all.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I had to add that.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. So we're going to move on, though, to our next segment, spoiler-free discussion. Is this movie an essential horror movie? I think that, the meaning of that is up to some interpretation, but Bobby, you're ready to go.
I would love to go
horror
first.
movie? Is this an essential horror movie? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It is absolutely this. I am very happy to put this on my essentials list, and I'll give my reasoning for it. Although I doubt I'll get a lot of pushback for this. I checked earlier today. Rotten Tomatoes. It's like essential movies of black horror, right? And there's also this thing on Shudder called Film Noir, which is
horror
about
noir. Yeah,
horror noir. That's what it is. Horror noir, which is about black horror, right?
Yep, that's the next on my list.
It's very good. It's a really cool documentary. I highly recommend it for anybody who has Shudder. And I realized something. Prior to Jordan Peele's movies, which absolutely appeal to a larger audience while still being quintessentially black horror films. That was what Candyman was, right? A lot of other black horror films are really good and are much more accessible than we think they are. But for some reason, a lot of white people, including myself, unfortunately, did not watch them. Right? Like, I didn't watch Blackula. I didn't watch Bones. And Bones is fucking sick as hell.
Yeah.
Right?
I can't believe you haven't watched it.
I've watched Bones now,
okay,
yes.
Yeah.
or like Tales from the Hood and things like that. Like the Blade movies, maybe. Or like the People Under the Stairs, that's like a wild Wes Craven movie.
And
like,
you don't think about that as being one of those movies, but it absolutely is.
It so is, right? And like those movies were like, I think like it brought black horror to a mainstream audience, right? While still maintaining like a really strong message that like black horror does, right? Like that it speaks to the black experience as far as I can tell and as far as I have been told and as far as I've read, right? I cannot speak to the black experience, not black, right? But in a way that like, and it's just good, but it also like it's a cheeky little like Dracula movie that is very much that like is scary and gory and like gives anything a mainstream horror movie audience can watch, and you leave it going with a little seed in your head of being like, that movie might have been a little bit of a thinker, and then you go back and then like 5-10 years later you're a leftist wanting to destroy the patriarchy. It's just how it happens.
That's where it starts. You watch Candyman, and then 10 years later...
Step 1, step 2.
Yeah, step 1, watch Candyman. Step 2, become a leftist. Step 3, question mark. Step 4, profit.
You forgot about Based. You didn't add a based in there.
Oh, no, sorry. Step 4, become based.
Yeah,
there you go. We have to have a based in there.
You gotta become based at some point. Yeah.
Come on. Like, what are we doing here?
The solution is to become based. You're absolutely right. I'm so sorry.
Grant, let's hear from you next.
I also think it's essential, for sure. I was gonna kind of go along the same lines as Bobby did, right? With like the black horror kind of stuff, and how like he is one of the first like big like black villains or antagonists in horror, and it's hard to overlook that. And besides that, it brings up a lot of sensitive issues that I think is great and good. And I mean, even before I knew anything about Candyman, I heard the name. I know that it's well revered, and anybody that has ever told me, "Hey, horror movies are cool," also say, "Yeah, Candyman is really good." And so it's hard for me to go against the grain on that, and I don't want to because I think it is an essential horror movie that I would 100% be happy to have on my list.
I would have given it essential whether or not I liked it or not, but I liked it, so
Yeah,
definitely.
I love that. Yeah.
So you said something that made my brain kind of go off there. You said a black horror villain.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's interesting about that is black people, this is speaking more in a historical term here, have easily been categorized as villains throughout history, circa all time, basically. And I mean, even the creation of Candyman himself, this isn't really a spoiler I guess, is it okay for me to say his origin in this segment, or do we want to avoid that?
He got lynched. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, cool,
Yeah,
thanks.
there you go.
I didn't know how we wanted to play that, but like the idea of him is he was a black person, an artist, who I want to say the subtext, or even overt text, is he fell in love with a white woman, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Exactly. So he was the villain and was murdered for that, creating this ghostly apparition Candyman, cool, all that. I was looking up just black horror villains.
Yeah.
Was Candyman effectively like the first black horror villain?
Blackula.
Yeah.
I didn't know which came first.
Blackula
To be
came
honest
for
with
like
you.
a
Existed by
while.
like 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
honestly, had no idea. But my point is the idea that black people have been villainized for all sorts of things. You could go back in terms of movies and find villainized repeatedly over time. But it's almost in a way inclusive, the idea of having a black horror villain, because there should be one. Why not? You know what I mean? Like it's in a weird way an objectively like good thing. Because horror villain, I think that kind of goes back to the idea of this is a folk horror movie. All sorts of cultures will have their own types of folklore and history and stories that get passed down from generation to generation. So why not have one that is more of a black kind of origin? I think that's a good thing. We should have those kinds of things. So it's interesting you say that, right? It kind of like it put me in a path where I'm like, huh, that's it. It's an interesting way to look at it, and I guess that would also tie into the fact that I also think this is essential. This is a pretty easy recommendation for just about anybody looking for. I wouldn't really say this is even a hard movie in terms of the horror aspects. It definitely gets a bit. If you can't handle
Bees.
animals, I'll say that. Maybe this isn't necessarily the movie you should watch in terms of like a horror aspect. I could understand that. But it's a pretty approachable movie, I think, overall. Very easily watchable. This to me is a movie where I would love to watch it again and a few more times. This would be an easy, hey Alan, what do you want to do? Oh, we're just gonna watch a movie. Okay, we want to watch a horror movie that we've seen a few times. Oh, Candyman? Sweet, let's do it. It's a very easy movie to recommend just about anybody watch. And I think that's the simplicity of that to me shows essential in a good way.
Yeah.
The idea of this is a pretty easy movie just to recommend. not just to horror fans, but more the layperson for horror, or layperson for movies that's maybe wanting to branch out a bit.
For sure. You know, on that exact topic, Bobby has watched Candyman like 3 or 4 times in the last year. So
True. That's true.
This was my first time. I
Yeah,
will
same.
100% be watching this movie again.
Yeah.
Like this is an easy like, oh, it's Halloween. Let's watch. You know, not only your classics you would expect, but Candyman.
but also the classic
we're in the
you would
movie
expect,
for that.
Candyman.
Of course. Yeah.
I fell into it. The first time I watched it intentionally. The second time I watched it, it just happened to be like on somewhere, and I was like, yeah. And then this is the third time, and like, dude, every time you watch it. I didn't get bored anytime I watched this movie. It's just like ignoring all of the political stuff that we talked a lot about during our spoiler part of the episode. It's just a good flick. It's just a fun movie to watch. Like it's just got that chef's kiss of just like it moves fast enough, it's short enough, it's just
We didn't say anything about the pacing, but this movie just moves
there's
in a
wasted time. There's no
It's
wasted
so
time.
fluid.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
there's no lack of characterization in movies that move it's just you get everything you to get. Like even that there's like a shitty professor scumbag character at one point in this movie, and you get everything you need in the one scene that he is in.
Yep.
Like you know everything about this guy, and like it's a really well written movie for characterization for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, to close it out, I mean, I obviously agree, especially if you listened to the spoiler part. I loved this movie. I absolutely think it's essential. This was my second time watching it, my first time as an adult, and I think that if you love horror or want to love horror, or even are trying to if you're one of those people that wants to get into horror, that likes the idea of it, but is maybe shying away from certain aspects, maybe you don't want to be part of something that's too scary, or maybe you don't like jump scares or stuff like that, this is a perfect movie to watch because it says a lot. It's scary, it's creepy, but it's never tropey with the horror. And that makes it a very approachable, Alan mentioned it, a very approachable horror movie, while still carrying with it a strong message and a stronger villain. And it's absolutely an essential watch.
That's 4 essentials.
Yeah.
We need to watch something that we disagree on.
Oh, they're
Just to
coming.
have, like-
they're coming down the pipe, I'm sure.
Oh, don't worry. Next week we're gonna have some. People are gonna have some thoughts.
Ooh, Bobby with a little foreshadowing there.
Yeah, it's not a secret. We're watching Hellraiser next week, and I think that could bring some disagreement.
I think the next 2 weeks actually.
What's after Hellraiser?
Hellraiser and The Exorcist 3.
Yeah.
I feel like I might be an island on both of those movies.
So, again, behind the scenes for the audience here, as I've said twice now, and this will be the third time, I'm a little bitch boy. And when I was a kid, Corbin grew up loving horror. And I couldn't handle it because I was scared of fucking thunderstorms, let alone the scary guy on the screen trying to intentionally scare me. So most of these legacy horror movies are first watch for me. And what I've been trying to do is, for like The Exorcist, here's another one that's gonna, this might put me out there. I've never seen The Exorcist 1 or the second, so I'm gonna burn through both of those movies before I watch Exorcist 3 so that I have proper context of what's going on here. But a lot of times, if we kind of jump in the middle of a franchise, I burn through the whole beginning of the franchise to have context of what's occurring.
You can skip The Exorcist 2, by the way.
All right, cool.
It
I'll
goes
do
straight.
that
It just
because,
goes
frankly,
one to
time
three.
is a
Yeah.
valuable resource.
You don't need to watch that movie at all.
I know that I should have seen
like a
The
million
Exorcist 1 a long time ago.
Yeah,
Another
talking about
one,
essential films, like Jesus.
another one we're
alert,
gonna
dude.
watch that I should have seen a long time ago, and I know this is future is American Psycho. That's another one that I know that by this point I should have seen, but I wouldn't say I was even open to horror movies until like maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
I think
It took me a long time. I don't know if it was just being in Corbin's presence for 20 years. It just weighed me down to the point where I was like, all right, well, I might as well watch these things because this guy apparently likes them.
Yeah, Alan, we are very much in the same boat, paddling together.
What's fascinating about our cast is Grant and I are definitely more the newbies, and Bobby and Corbin are 100% the vets. So our perspectives on these kinds of movies can, like, I'll find myself going like, oh, Grant, you get it. Yeah, I'm on the same wavelength as you. And then Bobby and Corbin will be like, here's these deeper level thoughts that you guys didn't think of, but here they are. And I'm like, oh, fuck, these guys get it.
Yeah, I mean, until like this October, I really didn't dive deep into horror, and Corbin and Bobby have kind of guided me past the landmines into the good ones, and I'm very
we're gonna
excited.
hit landmines.
I was
imagine.
gonna say, but here's the thing: is that you don't know is that I'm gonna drive you into the landmines now.
Oh yeah,
Eventually, like it's gonna happen.
I will drive you to landmines of my own.
Yeah. All of Corbin's picks are just gonna be Landmine City for the next bit of shit.
Me and Corbin have very different taste in landmines too. That's the best part about it.
I opened with an essential pick. This was my pick for the show, Candyman, and so now I can just load you with garbage for a couple of movies.
Hey, speaking of Star Trek, what are we doing?
Yeah, Alan, what Star Trek have you been consuming lately?
Well, zero Star Trek actually. Not a whole lot different from last week. I played a little bit more of Mass Effect 2 because I beat Mass Effect 1 and moved on to Mass Effect 2. I haven't had a chance really to play much of anything. Now that I think about it, it's been a very busy week with work, so I haven't been consuming much other media besides really Candyman. Played a bit of Mass Effect 2, more disc golf, as I always talk about. I play in a league on the same night we record, so my evenings are always very jam-packed. I go straight from
disc golf.
Oh, well, I played like shit today, but that's neither here nor there.
It kind of sounds like it might be here. How bad did you play?
I shot a +6 on a course. I pretty routinely can shoot about a 4-5 under or so.
Yeah, that's
it was a bad showing for me tonight, especially considering one of the guys on my card shot a 13 down out there.
Wow.
He laced it. I was practicing. So I try to get there about 20-30 minutes early every time I go out for league to practice putting for about 10-15 minutes, and then just warm my arm up because I'm not, a 19-year-old who can just go out there and do stuff. It's good to kind of get your body moving a bit. So I go out there and practice my drives, and there was this 10-year-old kid, and I throw maybe about 300, somewhere between 300 and 350 feet when I throw a disc, which is not great per se. And this kid's like, wow, every time I throw the disc, I'm like, wait, kid, thanks for making me feel good about my throws, even though they're garbage. Well, and then, so there's this other guy. This guy can throw easy 400. If you watch his disc fly and my disc fly, it's immediately apparent that this guy knows what he's doing and how to throw better than me. But I don't know. It was nice to get pumped up by some little kid being like, "Wow!"
I really like that we're just gonna let him call frisbees discs.
Okay, they're very different things. They're different things. They're inherently different things. A frisbee
you're gonna get canceled
and a disc are very different
frisbee
things.
golf community. You gotta stop.
First off, frisbee golf's not a thing. It's disc golf, motherfucker. All right.
Yeah, but
you get it right, Grant.
Like Bobby said, frisbee.
But yeah, I've played pretty much my week since last podcast has been disc golf. That's about it. I haven't had any time for games or other media. I have the Gunslinger on my bedside table, and I haven't read it in far too long. But I really need to get back to that. It's so good.
I just charged my Kindle because it had died. That's how long it had been since I'd picked up the Gunslinger.
The Gunslinger, the first in the Dark Tower series of books.
Yep.
Which is one of the greatest series of books ever.
It had been so long since I picked it up that my Kindle had just been sitting on my nightstand dead for a month. So I charged it. I'm ready to go. I've been meaning to get back into it. But I haven't been reading it. I have just the only game I've really been able to play is Destiny 2. I started playing Knockout City, which is a very interesting game.
I've been meaning to play that. I haven't had a chance, but I want to so bad.
I think I love it, but I need to play it. I need to play it a little bit more. I'm only about 45 minutes in. For anybody that doesn't know, it's a dodgeball third-person shooter. It's free if you have Game Pass. It's only like 9 gigs, so just download it and give it a try. It's really cool. It's really intuitive to play. I do recommend it at this point. I'll have a lot more to say about it next week, I think. And then I've been watching. Last week I mentioned I had just finished In Search of Darkness. This week I've just finished In Search of Darkness 2.
You finished that like today, didn't you?
Yep. And it's pretty cool. I definitely recommend it just as much as I recommend the last one. They're good. They're just good fun. Like, I guess the downside of those documentaries is that if you're really a really deep horror fan, you're probably not going to learn like literally anything from them. They're not deep dives at all, but they're just enjoyable. They're just fun to watch.
I'm into that.
Yeah. What else are you?
I also have been watching In Search of Darkness 2.
Oh yeah, have you?
That's right. Oh yeah, I finished it. I finished it earlier this week.
I love that.
It's really cool. I agree. It's really good. The only real game I've played is Destiny 2 this week, admittedly, which, that's... If you tuned into the stream yesterday, I know you didn't, so don't lie to me. But also, I have been reading. I talked about playing Warhammer 40K last episode, which is a tabletop game that me and most of us in the podcast and some of our other friends play, except for Alan, because Alan is boo-boo bad. And lives in a state that isn't real, Indiana.
Hey, I came from a state that exists. Does that count for anything?
True.
You've left it behind.
But I bought the first book told from the orc perspective because I play orcs. Brutal but cunning. It's very fun, very funny, very brutal. And so that's been kind of what's been taking up my ear space.
Nice.
Yeah.
I didn't think I've been listening to Light of the Jedi by that was the first like High Republic Star Wars book.
Okay, sure.
It's really cool. I didn't think about that.
Is that current canon or old canon?
So it's the current canon, but it's the segment furthest back in the timeline. It's like 500 years before Phantom Menace.
Okay.
There's like no Sith. It's like it's not quite Old Republic,
Yeah.
It's good though. It's a very, very well done audiobook, which is how I'm listening to it.
I listen to all the Star Wars audiobooks are that any Star Wars audiobook is probably the easiest recommendation for your Audible credit of all time. They're all done so very well. I haven't listened to the Thrawn books because I want to say there was a second one that came out, and I think there was a third one that was
They're
supposed
on
to
the
happen.
second trilogy of books, so there's like 4 or 5 right now.
I listened to the very first one of the new canon when it came out. Loved it and haven't gone back to it. I've got a 4.5-hour drive ahead of me tomorrow, so I might actually resubscribe to Audible just to have something to occupy my time. It'd be a good way to do it.
Hey, Grant, what are you up to?
Yeah, talk to us, Grant.
I play Destiny. We had our weekly raid that Alan decided to ditch us for. So
okay, fuck you. I had to. All right, I had to spend some time with my wife.
It really makes you wonder, right? Alan's not raiding with us. He's not playing 40K. It's like, what is?
How
Right.
dedicated to the world is he?
Yeah,
he's got to go to the weekly Indiana meeting. So whatever. But yeah.
Hold on, did you just acknowledge a place that you say doesn't exist, so that by definition it exists? That's quoting, motherfucker.
It's a
all
Zoom,
right?
It's a Zoom meeting. You don't go there, actually.
It's like
my mistake.
It's like saying we're bird watching. Birds aren't real either.
Right. But played a little bit of League of Legends and Smite. Watched their pro scene that I watch every week. I watched Bo Burnham's new Netflix special, Inside.
Oh, good, dude.
Been meaning to watch it. I need to watch it with my wife.
Made me really confront some things about myself.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Grant.
There's a bunch of memes on TikTok, which is like people going in like, yeah, Bo Burnham, love comedy, can't wait to sit down and watch it. And then at the end, it's just like they have like a blue light shining down, and they're just looking down at the ground. It's a very big thinker. I still think it has the comedy, but it also makes you think. Besides that, I've been listening to a lot of like music on my drive to and from work. So much so that like I just basically went into like, okay, metalcore, playlist. Let's see what I know and don't know, and kind of came across like a lot of ones that I just didn't really listen to that now I'm a huge fan of. One of my biggest is Stitch by Wage War.
Oh,
Really like that one. Hurricane by I Prevail. I like that one too.
I like I Prevail a lot, but I think that's one of their weaker songs,
I
personally.
hate that song.
And then I
I'll
think,
be honest.
I think it's pronounced Levy by Mice and Men. I think that might be a new one. And I really like that one too. But yeah, I've been listening to a lot more of.
if you like that vocal style, you might like his other band. Their vocal, Jamie's Elsewhere.
Okay. Besides that, I mean, I listen to my weekly podcast. I listen to a fantasy football podcast every week because I want to get the edge on the competition and win this year. Because actually, my last 2 years, I've been like last place or around last place, which is actually quite impressive. Because if you're last place, you get first pick in the next draft.
So you're just
the only
saving
reason
up all those first picks, right?
Right. So we run a keeper league, which is basically like for 2 years you can decide like, hey, this is a player that I want, and they don't go back into the pool of like pickable players, right?
You kept Gurley, didn't you?
No, I didn't keep Gurley. I kept worse, but the same. I kept Mark Ingram after last year because he did really good last year, and then he did nothing. And I was just like, well, that's a second round value, like where I had him at, and it just didn't work out. But I'm going to do good this year, I promise. But yeah,
follow up with
for
you
anybody-
on that. I'm
for
not going to
any-
let you fall off the bandwagon there, bud. I'll check
I
in.
won't. Do it.
Because you're in the same league with friend of the show Nick, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, yeah. We'll follow up. We'll follow up on this.
Yeah, I get to pick Christian McCaffrey for first pick, so things are looking up.
For anybody that's only listening right now, you can't tell, but Bobby and I know a lot about football.
Sorry.
Our
That's
faces
the one
say-
with
say
the
it all.
egg-shaped one, right?
I think so.
Yeah, basically.
It's like
But,
a Reese's, like.
Besides that, the
I'm
Bo
kidding.
Burnham,
Both my brothers are football
the
players.
Bo Burnham song also has, or the Bo Burnham special also has some pretty good songs that like I have downloaded on Spotify because I'll listen to them even if they're not in the special.
All right.
Yeehaw!
That's crazy. That's great. Moving on, though.
Yeah.
Our final little segment, just a tiny little one. Grant, where can people find you online?
You can find me at the tag GFooty on all things that matter. GFOOTEY. You can find me on Twitter, eventually Twitch. Still getting around to that. I know. Venmo, in case you want to send me free money. Just any of those.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, you
Secure
can.
your bag, bud.
Yeah, you can find me at Corbangarang. Also, basically anywhere that I think matters. The thing that I love, everybody says that sometimes it carries like an implication there that like if you can't find us, like we don't care at all about that.
True.
I'm on Twitter. That's my main dish. You can find my link tree there to everything else. Follow me on Letterboxd if you want to see my written reviews. And that's me, Corbangarang, anywhere. Alan?
You can find me at a seal punter on Twitter, Instagram. I don't tweet a whole lot, but if you tweet to me, there's a pretty good chance I reply. Instagram is pretty much just disc golf stuff because I'm a nerd and I really enjoy playing disc golf. And yeah, that's about it on my socials.
Nice.
You can probably find me best at twitch.tv/theredweenie. All of my relevant socials are in my channel page and all that stuff. I stream Destiny once a week as it's been as of late. I might start streaming some of the games that we have down the pipe too. Mm-hmm. So if you want to see me sit in a dark basement with red lighting, go a bunch, then you can watch that as well. So hope to see you guys there.
I love that.
Heck yeah.
But I think that about wraps us up for the week, right, guys?
It's been decidedly essential.
It's been
essential.
decidedly essential.
Can't wait till it's more in the middle and we have to figure out what the hell we're gonna say.
Yeah, it's been unanimously essential.
Ooh.
True.
Thank you to everybody who listened. Thank you to the three of you for being on the show. I absolutely love doing this with you all. I've been your host, Corbin, and this has been Essential Scares.